Hi, my name is Grace Jackson. I'm going to be discussing why I believe everyone should have to work in the food industry. So, why should you have to work in the food industry? There's a huge issue of non-compassionate or rude customers in the workplace that affects the mental health of the workers. I believe a way to combat this issue is suggesting that every person have to work in the food industry at least once so they can see the hardships and struggles we have to endure on a daily basis. According to a survey done by Kat Kinsman in 2016 on food industry workers, she found that 84.2% suffer with depression, 73.2% suffer with anxiety, 49.9% deal with substance abuse issues, and 75.5% use alcohol to cope with their problems. I started to see a pattern after conducting my own research at the restaurant that I've been employed at for over 3 years. I documented some of the struggles someone in the food industry can have and found numerous correlations between work and their mental health. Today I'll be discussing why I believe everyone should have to work in the food industry and the benefits of doing so. I will also be speaking about the effects of the pandemic on the restaurant employees and the restaurant as a whole. So there are a lot of skills that you can gain by working in the food industry. For example, problem solving, leadership, patience, teamwork, and logical thinking. So I decided to take this issue into my own hands and survey the coworkers front of house and back of house at the restaurant that I work at, and these are the statistics that I've concluded. So at J. Butler's, 71.5% stated that they do struggle with mental health issues prior to employment. Out of that group of people, 80% of those employees stated that their mental health has worsened since working in the food industry. 28.5% of my coworkers stated that they do not struggle with any mental health issues currently, but out of that group of people, 50% stated that they start to feel panicky or anxious, but only in the workplace. So there are positives and upsides of the food industry, like it's usually good money, fast cash, you don't have to wait for a paycheck, you get to take home money that night, discounted food and beverages, and then friends. There's negatives like high stress environment, having to rely on tips, no health insurance or 401k, and then inconsistent money. After explaining all the positives and negatives, let's discuss the turnover rate for the industry and challenges contributing to poor employee retention in these types of jobs. So according to Notch Financial, the turnover rate in the food industry was 75% and growing since the pandemic. Why is the turnover rate so high? According to Dr. Ryan Griffin, there's a high number of younger or adolescent workers in the food industry. When there's younger people, it leads to quitting jobs, they have to go back to school, which leads to a higher turnover rate. Nation's Restaurant News gave reasons for high turnover in the industry as a result of the pandemic, low compensation, long hours, easier exposure to COVID, no healthcare benefits, and then the possibility of exposing loved ones outside of the workplace. The economy after COVID really declined, which in turn has made it to where customers have less money or more frugal in their spending. This means eating out less, tipping less, prices are rising. According to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, May of 2020, the price for imported meat rose 16%, which was one of the biggest inclines since 1993. This means companies raising prices to cover costs and supply chain issues. Now that we've discussed high turnover and effects of the pandemic on the food industry, let's touch on why every person should have to work in the food industry at least once. I decided to survey all of my regular customers in the last 3 years, and I asked them 2 questions. Have you ever worked in the food industry? If so, would you do it again? I also rated them on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being not problematic, 10 being very problematic. And factors I kept in mind were complaining about bill prices, being rude, starting fights, not tipping, walking out on their tabs, making sexual comments, using foul language. So out of my 56 regulars, 46.5% of them have never worked in the food industry before, and 53.5% of them previously worked in the food industry or still do. Out of the customers who have never worked in the food industry before, 76.9% of them answered that they would never work in a restaurant. Out of the same group of people, 92.3% of them scored a 5 or higher when scaling how problematic they were. So out of the customers that have worked in the food industry, 40% stated that they would never do it again. But out of the same people who have worked in the food industry, 100% of them scored a 4 or lower on the problematic scale, so not problematic at all. After analyzing the results from my survey, I concluded that there's a direct correspondence between non-problematic customers and being employed in the food industry at some point of their lives. Not all my customers that have never worked in the food industry are problematic, and some have even proven to be genuinely respectful customers. With that being said, it is obvious that there's a lot of lack of compassion for situations that happen, regardless of whether it's a situation that we have any control over. I'm not saying that waitstaff never make mistakes, but I am saying that there are a lot of things that go on behind the scenes that you might not realize if you've ever lived through it. Thank you. I made notes.